My name is Dishon, and I'm a member of the League of Women Voters of the Ann Arbor area, serving all of Washtenaw County. I welcome you to our forum this evening, co-sponsored by the League of Women Voters, the Dispute Resolution Center, and the Washtenaw County Bar Association. This evening, we feature candidates for Washtenaw County Prosecuting Attorney. These candidates will be on the ballot in the primary election on Tuesday, August 4th. This year, the League of Women Voters is celebrating our 100 years of expanding voter rights, educating voters, and shaping and influencing legislation at local, state, and national levels. The League is pleased to co-sponsor these forums. The League of Women Voters is a nonpartisan civic organization that works to increase understanding of major public policy issues, to strengthen and broaden knowledge about our form of government and democracy. While the League does not support individual candidates or political parties, we do take stands on issues we have studied. One of the League's most important goals is to assist voters in making informed choices at the polls, and thus, we bring you tonight's program. Our moderator this evening is Belinda Dulin from the Dispute Resolution Center, who will explain the format and get us started. Ms. Dulin?
Thank you, Ms. Dishon. And now it's my honor to introduce our three candidates running for the Washtenaw County Prosecutor's Office, Mr. Hugo Mack, Mr. Savit, and Ms. Arianne Slay. Thank you again for your participation in tonight's forum. Before we get started with our candidates, there are a few things I want to bring to the audience's attention. The forum this evening will have this format. Each candidate will have an opening statement of up to 1 minute. Each candidate will have a closing statement of up to 90 seconds. In between, I will ask questions which have come from the Washtenaw County community. Each candidate will have 2 minutes to respond to a question. At appropriate times, a sign on the screen will indicate the time remaining, 30 seconds, and then stop. If you have used up your time, you will be allowed to finish your sentence, and then your microphone will be muted so that other candidates will have the equal opportunity to participate. The candidates will begin speaking in alphabetical order. Depending on the number of questions, all candidates will have an opportunity to be the first or the last to answer the questions. Now we're ready to begin with our opening statements, and I'll start with Mr. Mack.
Well, thank you so much for the opportunity here. This campaign, this election, is about change. Change is an easy word to say, but a difficult one to substantiate. What I offer the citizens of Washtenaw County is a once-in-a-millennium opportunity to elect a person that is supremely qualified for this position. Putting aside ideology, putting aside any other thought, experience matters. This situation is one that is so important to 365,000 people. Electing someone that is not experienced is simply the wrong thing to do. I offer my qualifications as a public defender, unsurpassed excellence in the courtroom. I offer my unsurpassed and unequaled administrative experience. I offer my community experience in communities that have been underprotected and disrespected. And I offer the perspective of a person that's been through the system, fighting through injustice to come back to offer their services to the people of Washtenaw County. I believe firmly that we are here together, we're better off, and come January 2021, restorative justice truly will come to Washtenaw County.
Thank you so much, Mr. Mack, for your opening statement. We're going to move to Mr. Savit, your opening statement.
Well, thank you for the opportunity, and thanks to everybody watching. This is a crucial election because we have an opportunity to chart the course for our justice system for not just the next 4 years, but many, many years after that. My background, I'm a born and raised Washtenaw County resident. I'm a civil rights and public interest lawyer, and I got into this campaign to bring that perspective, to bring a civil rights perspective to this prosecutor's office. The truth of the matter is we have some of the worst inequities in the state of Michigan here in Washtenaw County. 70% of the children involved in our juvenile justice system are Black, whereas Black people make up just 12% of the population. We need a clean slate. We need to move forward and have an equity and civil rights oriented perspective to root out these inequities, to build a fairer, more accountable, and more equitable justice system that doesn't just work for the wealthy and the powerful, but that works equally for everybody. That is my background. That is what I have spent my life doing. And that is what I will bring to you as county prosecutor.
Thank you so much, Mr. Savit. And Ms. Slay, your opening statement.
Thank you. Good evening, everyone. My name is Arianne Slay, and I am running to be your next Washtenaw County prosecutor. I am a Washtenaw County, Ypsilanti Township resident. I grew up in Ann Arbor, where my mom still lives. My entire professional career has been in criminal justice. I started out working in the jail at Community Corrections, where I did everything from urine testing and drug testing all the way through supervision and providing scaffolding services to people in the community as they were re-entering our community from being incarcerated. I also served as an assistant prosecuting attorney, where 6.5 of those years I was your lead domestic violence prosecutor. But today I am the senior assistant city attorney in Ann Arbor and the courtroom prosecutor for the city. And I have brought diversion, deflection, and restorative justice programs right here to Washtenaw County in our adult system, something that no one else on this ballot can say. I'm looking forward to tonight's forum and hoping to answer all your questions. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Thank you all for your opening statements. Now we're going to transition into the questions. As a reminder, I will be reading questions that have been submitted by members of the community. I will read the question one time. It will not be repeated unless you request that I repeat it. We will start with Mr. Savit with question number 1. Unmute yourself, Mr. Savit. The question is, do you think a racially and gender diverse leadership team will help dismantle institutional inequities in the criminal justice system? Do you plan to operate the prosecutor's office with racial and gender diverse leadership, and how will you accomplish that?
Thank you for the question. And yes, I absolutely believe that diversity in the prosecutor's office, in the courtroom, in the jury pool, every place in the criminal justice system is absolutely necessary. Justice must satisfy the appearance of justice. And it is simply unjust. And it does not reflect the diversity of a community when you have a bunch of assistant prosecutors, a bunch of lead prosecutors, a bunch of leaders in the prosecutor's office who are presiding over a system in which primarily Black, Brown, and Indigenous people are disproportionately affected, and most of those prosecutors are white. That is the current reality in the Washtenaw County Prosecutor's Office. Look, I recognize the irony of this because I'm a white guy and I'm running to be the county prosecutor. What I do promise is that we will have a diverse leadership team and we will have diverse courtroom prosecutors that reflect the diversity of this community. I've made specific promises along these goals. I will promise to use at least 50% and probably more of our recruitment budget on outreach to minority bar associations and to minority law student groups. I will make sure that our office reflects gender equity and gender equality. For far too long, this prosecutor's office has not been a place in which many women feel welcome working, particularly after they have decided to start a family. And you can talk to many of the assistant prosecutors who have left the office to get more perspective on that. That's going to change. We are going to have family-friendly workplace policies when I am prosecutor. This is something that I do currently in my day job at the city of Detroit. I oversee a team. We have policies that allow folks to start families. We have a diverse team, and that is exactly what I will bring to the prosecutor's office.
Thank you very much, Mr. Savit. Same question to Ms. Slay.
Thank you. Diversity, equity, inclusion is all part of the platform, not only that I have run, but I have been committed to my entire career. it is a very interesting time to be a prosecutor, but it doesn't look much different than it did when I started years ago. Many times I'll be the only person in the courtroom who is a Black person who's not there awaiting trial. That's what it looks like until we have people coming in for their cases. It is very important that our community see diversity not only in the office, but also in law enforcement as well. Creating a culture where we value diversity of thought and diversity and ethnicity is extremely important. So what I have done as your Ann Arbor City prosecutor is to make sure that we bring different experiences into law enforcement in general. I have recommended to the county prosecutor's office, they've taken me up on that, and have brought into the Ann Arbor Police Department, who I also work with as legal counsel, to bring different community members in to teach what looks like a very homogeneous community of what it's like to be Black, what it's like to be Muslim, what it is like to live in Washtenaw County and not be a white male, and what that looks like in the justice system. I think it is far past time that we look to each other in our community for support. We have the type of community that we demand. And if we have a homogeneous prosecutor's office or law enforcement, it's because we haven't been working together. Collaboration is what is going to bring us together. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Slay. Mr. Mack, same question.
Yes. It's one thing to talk in an abstract sense about restorative justice and things you've done in that. It's another thing to be the living, breathing example of it. So when you talk about diversity, when you talk about the need for diversity, the best person to talk about that is one who has made his career protecting and defending juveniles, young children, people in misdemeanor court, people in circuit court from systemic racism. Nobody knows the need for diversity better than a person who's been there fighting systemic racism. That person is me. So in terms of this campaign, in terms of the office, I believe the office should reflect the community that it represents. However, it is not a reverse pass card because of somebody's color. It's not a matter of color, it is a matter of character. So for me, in terms of the diversity, I agree with we need diversity of thought. In terms of the police, in terms of restorative justice and holding diversity in terms of them, the best account you can have to assure fair treatment of people, because that's what really this is all about. Everybody's talking about fair treatment of people or the police. The best way you can bring police in line is called accountability. So for me, all the training in the world and let's have a, everybody sit down and watch Roots again or something like that, that only has marginal impact. Accountability is what's important. So I will hold people accountable. I want the community to know their prosecutor is one who believes in them, not only talks about them in an abstract sense like other people, but have lived, coming back and understanding what it's like to rebuild. 70% of the people coming back, recidivism in the fourth richest county in the state. That is a problem because people have lost hope. The best way to make our society better, our community better, is to elect a person who represents the community totally. You only have one candidate in this election that represents the community totally. The person that understands the need for diversity, the need for juries to be selected properly, that I have seen firsthand prosecutors use their power in a racially divisive way.
Thank you very much, Mr. Mack. Thank you, Mr. Mack. I'm going to have to stop you there. Thank you so much for your response. We're going to shift gears a little bit. Oh, actually, I'm not. I have one more question I want to ask in terms of the office. Are there any other institutional changes you plan to make in the prosecutor's office to address the inequities of the criminal justice system? And we'll begin with you, Ms. Slay.
Thank you. There are an inordinate amount of inequities in the criminal justice system, and I will be making several changes. First and foremost, I will bring diversion and deflection programs to the office that are based on the principles of restorative justice, just as I have as the assistant city attorney in Ann Arbor. Now, what that looks like is actually meeting people where they are. So if somebody is in crisis for mental health or substance abuse, we will hold their warrant in abeyance as long as they're not a danger to the community. And how that will work is it will allow them to get treatment. This is a program that's already funded, and I'm very proud to have been working on this with Sheriff Clayton, who was one of my first endorsers, and that we will be working on the LEAD program. That's law enforcement assisted diversion. Part of that is built on the principles of restorative justice. That's a program that I will bring in. In addition to that, I would like to bring the program that I've been using in Ann Arbor, which is a deflection program, which means we never charge your warrant. How that works is that we provide community support for you. Whatever your issue is, to address the root cause as to why you became justice involved. And I believe that will also help as an alternative to incarceration. It will decrease the mass incarceration issues that we do have in our county. In addition to that, it will lessen our issues that we have with our current bail system. And it actually will be good litmus for how we need to reform our bail system in the future. Thank you.
Thank you. Mr. Mack, same question.
Yes. First of all, you have to start structurally. In terms of the bail situation, I believe that we should have from the very beginning the fairest charge from the beginning. The error of overcharging people in order to try and get some kind of a plea agreement later on will end when I'm the next prosecutor. That's one thing we're going to do. We're going to collaborate with the victim to see what we need to make them whole. And once again, restorative justice is something that people can throw around, but the reality and nuts and bolts of it, it is based on making the victim whole. That's the first tenet of restorative justice. So we're going to collaborate with the victims to see what's the lowest charge that will make you whole and hold the person accountable. Now, in terms of release, I believe that people should not be penalized because of their poverty, all right? But I also believe that rich people should not be emboldened because of their richness. So my goal is to extol the legislature to have a blended cash bail risk assessment, which will protect us in terms of poor people and give us some hook in terms of rich folks. Now, that's a bully pulpit from the prosecutor's office. That's what I can do. I'm not promising anybody that I'm going to do that as the prosecutor. The prosecutor enforces the law, does not write the law. Now, the other thing we're going to do is this. In terms of sentencing, the sentence that we're going to recommend for a person is going to be on the lower end of the sentencing guideline. The reason that's important is because the judge has got tremendous discretion, a low end and a high end. I know personally the rigors that's faced by a person coming back, the discrimination, the sentence they're going to serve. They're not going to be able to sit on a jury, for example. They're going to face housing discrimination. That is a sentence they will carry for the rest of their lives. Therefore, when I'm the prosecutor, we're going to have the lowest possible sentence that is going to afford justice and afford an individual an opportunity to come back. Now, in terms of, there's a procedure known as investigative subpoenas. That's a mystery in the prosecuting attorney's office. We're going to severely curtail the use of those because I think it can put undue pressure on individuals. It can dehumanize individuals. It can make people uneasy and nervous. So we're not going to be bullying anybody. In terms of police, we're going to let it be known to police that I don't care what.
Mr. Mack, I'm going to have to jump in. I'm sorry to cut you off, but we have to move on.
Could somebody put up a 30-second warning? I thought somebody was going to do that. I'm not sure.
She's doing that. Look at the box that says Sally Brush. She's doing that. No problem. We have to go to Mr. Savit. Same question.
So this is fundamentally what my campaign is about, is transformational systemic change to our prosecutor's office. And I've laid out an 18-point plan for reform on my website, eli2020.com. I don't have time for 18 points in 2 minutes, but I'll highlight, some of the things. We are going to end coercive plea bargaining. We are going to end the use of the cash bail system here in Washtenaw County. We are going to build an immigration conscious prosecutor's office that takes stock of the immigration consequences of charges and keeps our immigrant population safe. But I want to focus on something more fundamental, institutionally. We talk about all of these severe racial inequities that we see here in the Washtenaw County's prosecutor's office. 70% of the kids in the juvenile justice system are Black. Black people are 8.5 times more likely than white people to be held in jail pending trial on cash bail, the highest disparity of any county that's been surveyed in the state. But the current prosecutor's office position on this has been to do nothing, has been to bury its head in the sand and pretend the problem doesn't exist. That is why, and I'm proud to be the only candidate in this race to have committed to this. We are going to do what prosecutors across the country have done, which is to open up the prosecutor's office's files, partner with an independent third-party evaluator, and identify every point in the justice system, from charging to plea bargaining to probationary terms, where we are seeing Black people, people of color, racial minorities be treated differently than white people for the same conduct. And when we do that, we will eliminate it, but it needs to be an independent third-party evaluator that we are partnering with. The prosecutor's office that has presided over this cannot self-police. We need to look this problem square in the eye. And until we do, real systemic change is not going to be possible. I will do it.
Thank you, Mr. Savit. Thank you for all of your responses. We're going to move on and talk a little bit more about the cash bail. Can prosecutors change or influence legislation on cash bail? And will you change the current practice or policy of requesting cash bails on some cases? And what kinds of cases would you do that? And we're going to start with Mr. Mack.
Well, first of all, the situation of cash bail is one that has systemically been a problem. So what happens is this. You cannot eliminate cash bail for poor people unless you eliminate it for rich people. If you eliminate it for some of the multimillionaires in Washtenaw County, you are not helping the disparity, you're making it worse. We've all heard the term dream team, all right? That puts too much of a boon in the hands of rich people and takes it away from poor people. The way you handle that, you have to have a fair, equitable system for a risk assessment. I believe with ProPublica, what they said. You take a look at a person's history, you take a look at their community ties. I believe in, for example, tethers and expansive use, for example, of community involvement for accountability. Unless a person is a threat to the community or there's witness tampering, I see no reason to separate them from their families, from their economy. And if the goal is to protect and defend Black people, well, then we need to understand that we need to be very sensitive to cultural differences, and we need to be so sure when we're electing judges. But I must say, I will use the bully pulpit to try to influence the legislature, but I will not posture myself as anybody, a candidate or anybody else, who says I'm going to be able to do that from the prosecuting attorney's office. The prosecutor does not set the bail, the magistrate judge. The prosecutor can say, I don't think there should be any bail at all. That is not their call. Once again, the prosecutor's job is to do something that is fair. And that's what I'm going to bring, fairness. It's going to be a fair charge in the first place. So a fair charge is going to go a long way to determine what kind of bail is set. You understand? So for me, that's why I will send police back indefinitely to research cases to be sure we've got a firm case before we proceed and jeopardize anybody's rights or their liberties. So it starts at the top, and that's the example I'm going to set, but I'm going to set it within the parameters of the prosecutor's position. I'm not going to pretend I can wave a magic wand for the people of the state of Michigan.
Thank you very much, Mr. Mack. Same question, Mr. Savit.
Yeah, so let's take a step back, and I'll be upfront about this. I categorically oppose cash bail. And the reason why is if we think about what cash bail is a system in which poor people who may not pose a threat to the community are sitting in jail without being convicted of anything for days, weeks, and months simply because they don't have enough money in their bank account. At the same time, wealthier people who may pose a threat to the community are able to buy their way out and be out on the street the next day simply because they are wealthy. Cash bail is an unjust, inequitable, and immoral system at its very core. And that is why I categorically oppose it. In terms of what that means as prosecutor, we are not going to be seeking cash bail. That does not mean, and I want to emphasize this, that does not mean that we will not advocate for people to be held or for conditions to be put on them that will ensure that they are held. But they will not be dependent, we will not be seeking conditions that are dependent on the size of one's bank account. The same standards need to apply to everybody, whether they are poor and whether they are wealthy. When you defend a cash bail system, what you are saying is that you are comfortable with people being trapped in poverty and trapped in jail because of poverty simply because they are poor. Possibly losing their jobs because they've been sitting in jail, possibly losing their housing, possibly disrupting their families. while at the same time, you are saying that it is okay for wealthy people who pose a threat to the community to go free simply because they are wealthy. Cash bail doesn't keep us safe. Cash bail is inequitable. We won't use it as prosecutor, and I will do everything in my power to ensure that the law is changed. And, you know, of course, it's all subject to what the legislature does, but I will use every single ounce of political capital that I have as county prosecutor to ensure that we get real, long-lasting change on our bail system in Michigan, because this is a moral issue for our time. It is past time to stop the criminalization of
Thank you
poverty.
very much, Mr. Savit. Thank you. Ms. Slay, same
Thank you
question.
so much. That is a fantastic question. I also agree that the cash bail system is horrible. It is categorically racist. It is a vestige that we have from slavery, putting worth onto people of monetary value, and it is a horrible system. But it is the system and the law of the land as it is right now. I stand with our governor when she says in the Joint Task Force on Jail and Pretrial Incarceration is that we need to reform our bail system. I will be the loudest person in the room, making sure that those changes are made. But in the meantime, we cannot not follow the law. We must follow the law that we have, because that is how we actually protect our community at this time. For those of you who aren't familiar with the bail system, there's a court rule, MCR 6106, and in subsection F, it tells us right there that you can be held without bond for murder, sexual assault first degree, which is rape, or if you are on bond for a violent felony, or if you are on probation or parole for a violent felony and you're alleged to have committed another one. There's no other way to ask someone to be remanded. And if we have not made changes to our system, cash bail is the only way to protect some of our victims and our most vulnerable population, our domestic violence survivors, our children from child abuse perpetration. I will tell you, as an assistant prosecutor, it is not a rarity to hear a defendant call from jail to say, you know what, you reported that domestic violence last night to the survivor, and I'm going to kill you when I get out. Or I'm going to harm you, I'm going to hurt the kids, I'm going to fill in the blank. And if there's not a way to make sure that that person stays, because it might be a domestic violence first offense, second offense, third offense, without using the cash bail system that we have now, we can't protect the people in our community who are our most vulnerable. But I will stand and zealously advocate for the changes that need to be made into the bail and bond system in this county. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Let's move to our next question related to domestic violence. Domestic violence is a problem in Washtenaw County. Many survivors feel that the system is not working for them for numerous reasons. What measures will you take to ensure that victims, survivors, and families are safe? Would you consider using restorative justice, even if it will give less power to your prosecutors? And we'll begin with Mr. Savit.
Yeah, so thank you for the question. And domestic violence and sexual assault are real issues in this county. And although, you know, our current prosecutor's office often likes to stand up and say that they are supportive of women, I have heard from a great many women who were not believed, whose stories were not heeded, and in large part, it is based on either who that woman was or often who the abuser was. You know, I have a close friend who was the victim of severe domestic abuse. She had all the evidence, she had contemporaneous reports, and the prosecutor's office sat on the case and has done nothing about it for over 6 years now, and I believe the statute of limitations recently expired. The main thing that differentiated her from a number of the people who are prosecuted for domestic violence is that her abuser happened to be wealthy and happened to be well connected. And far too frequently, we see this prosecutor's office decline to bring charges against folks who are wealthy or well-connected. And in large part, it's because prosecutors are, I'll have to say it, really often obsessed with their win rate and choose not to prosecute crimes when they're perpetrated by wealthy, well-connected individuals who may be able to afford excellent defense counsel. I am not afraid of going toe-to-toe in court against wealthy people or against good defense counsel. In my day job, I sue the biggest corporations on the planet, your Exxons, your Shells, your DuPont. We will make sure that the wealthy and the well-connected do not simply get a free pass because they are wealthy and well-connected, and that's especially true in domestic violence and sexual assault cases.
Thank you very much, Mr. Savit. Ms. Slay.
Domestic violence and sexual assault in any intimate partner capacity is something that I have always been passionate about. I ran the domestic violence unit in Washtenaw County for 6.5 years. And I can tell you that I have only pursued on a case where I felt like I could prove the elements beyond a reasonable doubt, because that's what we expect and that's what we should demand of our prosecutor's office. I can tell you that domestic violence cases that you see carry a very high risk of lethality. And that's something that not only I train the police about nationally, and as a MCOLS, which is a Michigan Coalition on Law Enforcement Standards, I've written the curriculum at our local community college for the police academy for domestic violence, strangulation, sexual assault, and trauma-informed interviewing. I will make sure that these procedures and policies are going to be followed to a T so that victims are experiences trauma-informed, so that not only the prosecutor's office, but law enforcement as well know how to communicate with some of our most vulnerable population. Now, I have worked setting up high-risk groups with Safe House Center, our local probation and parole, the defense bar, and with the prosecutor's office, so that we are making sure that we are providing safety planning services for all those who are experiencing domestic violence or any type of interpersonal violence. Most recently, I'm happy to announce that I worked on a team and I've put forward a lethality protocol, which will be going into effect for all law enforcement agencies in Washtenaw County at the end of this month. This protocol will assess lethality for people who are going through domestic violence in their homes, and it will be shared with Safe House Center. During my time as the lead domestic violence prosecutor, and we have re-strengthened this in 2015, and then again this year, we've made a commitment for law enforcement to contact Safe House Center after every instance of domestic violence that's reported to them. How we treat each other matters. Children who live in a home where there's domestic violence often have other problems as well. We need to make sure that we're providing supportive services. In terms of restorative justice, I do not believe that we should use restorative justice, as the power imbalance is inappropriate. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Mr. Mack.
This is a matter of the soul. A man by the name of Frantz Fanon once wrote a book called Pedagogy of the Oppressed. To be able to understand the plight of victims of domestic violence, you have to be the one like I am that stood with over 800 of them, protecting and defending their humanity when the prosecution wanted to put them in jail or prison. To understand the pedagogy of the oppressed, you have to be like me. For over 6 years, protecting young girls broke my heart in juvenile court. Victims of sexual assault, it was always mama's boyfriend or stepdaddy, broke my heart, broke my heart. In order to understand the pedagogy of the oppressed, you've got to understand. You've got to understand Ora Rozier, a woman who in 2014 was killed by the Ann Arbor Police Department, a woman who was crying out for help, a woman who went to one of my opponents 90 days beforehand, you see, and had an opportunity for help. It is not about winning. When you're dealing with 365,000 people's lives, it is not about winning. It is about maintaining the humanity of the individual. When you say the prosecutor is all about winning, you reduce the human being to a widget. In other words, if the widget meets standards, we'll let it go through. If it's defective, we just put it to the side. That will end when I'm the county prosecutor. When I hear people talking about training for police, where was the training for the police when Ora Rozier was tased and shot at the exact same time? I'm curious about that training. I'm curious about that. When I'm there and the prosecutor, when I'm talking about training the police, it's not going to be some abstract training that yields to some union pressure. It's not going to be some abstract training, you see, that yields to any kind of a police chief or sheriff endorsing anybody's campaign. It is going to be about holding people accountable, police officers that are put in the exact same position with life and death on the line. It is no excuse for one police officer saying we don't need to kill this person and another police officer saying we do need to kill this person. So anybody boasting about training, the training's been woefully deficient, but that training is going to improve when I'm the next county prosecutor.
Thank you very much. Thank you. We're going to shift gears just a tad bit and begin with Ms. Slay. One concerning problem in our society right now is the accountability of police misconduct. And given the close relationship between the prosecutor's office and law enforcement, we'd like to know, how will you approach those allegations of police brutality and hold officers accountable in relation to police brutality? Also, how will you build trust with the African American community?
Well, thank you for that question. So first and foremost, there is no home for police abuse or police brutality in Washtenaw County. And so training is a part of it, but part of the training, if you can train today, tomorrow, and every day in the future, but if you don't have accountability, it's for naught. Working at the city attorney's office in Ann Arbor, we've helped draft some new policies, and those policies are extremely important. The most recent one we put out was, if you see something, you must say something. That means if a police officer is witnessing racial bias, bigotry, or excessive force, they not only have a duty to intervene, but they have a duty to report as well, which is something that is not present in all of our police agencies. As the chief law enforcement officer, I would encourage all of our police agencies to engage in that. First and foremost, police officers historically have been trained inappropriately. We have made leaps and bounds in training efforts, and even in the last couple of years, talking about de-escalation, talking about making sure that we are using implicit bias training, but that's not enough. We need to also hold them accountable. So in addition to that, I will tell you this, I have prosecuted police officers before in the past. They will not be welcome. However, if there is an allegation of excessive use or inappropriate conduct, it is improper for the prosecutor's office to review any warrant request or any complaint that is for Washtenaw County officers. Sitting next to someone doing a drunk driving trial one day and the next day reviewing their warrant request does not spark any trust, and law enforcement is already short on that. Being transparent, providing an independent third-party agency the opportunity to give an unbiased view is what we should be doing. It's what we should have done in 2015. It's what we should do on every case going forward. It is important to provide transparency to the community to promote public trust. Thank you.
Thank you. Same question, Mr. Mack.
Well, first of all, to address the issue, perception becomes reality. The first thing we need to do is to elect a prosecutor that has no ties with the county sheriff via endorsement or association, that has no ties with Ann Arbor Chief of Police via endorsement or association. Because when a person is elected and they've got those ties, it gives a signal to the community that there's still that familiarity. I'm about change. Familiarity and change do not go in the same cup, you see? So for me, that's the first thing. Now, in terms of accountability, that is crucial. So when we look at racial disparities, the way we have to do it is, and I disagree with some of the people running in this race, I'm not going to farm out my responsibility to protect the people of Washtenaw County. They are not paying me, they're not hiring me to abrogate my responsibility to protect them with some third party. When I am the prosecutor, every cop is going to understand something. And all of my assistants, I'll give them a desk plate if I have to. New case, new cop. I don't care if you sat through a murder trial for 3 weeks next to a police officer. If I'm going to hire somebody who's going to say that Detective Jones, because we worked on a murder case together, they've got brownie points with me, they don't need to be working in this office. Because that's what the public has got to know. They've got to know that restorative justice applies to everybody. If I start farming out cases because I'm worried about public perception, then I'll be farming out cases forever. I'll be farming out cases where somebody started breaking into somebody's house. I'll be farming out cases where somebody steals a mountain bike. What I'm telling the citizens of Washtenaw County, with me as your prosecutor, when I say I will protect you from abusive police, that is exactly what I intend to do. So what starts in Washtenaw County will stay in Washtenaw County. I'm accountable to you. Somebody in Ogden, Utah is not accountable to you. I am. So you hold me accountable because I'm here to protect and defend and serve you.
Thank you. Mr. Savit.
Thanks for the question. So first of all, In instances of police violence, police brutality, it is imperative that the county prosecutor, who necessarily works day in and day out with police officers on cases, cannot keep that case for themselves. We need to have the appointment of a special prosecutor in every single case involving police violence and police brutality. This is consistent with the best recommendations of civil rights groups across the country. We saw in the George Floyd murder case that the charges were not brought, at least not as seriously as they should have been, until after the state attorney general took it over. We saw here with the Ora Rosser shooting in 2015, when Brian Mackey kept that case and cleared the officer himself, that it engendered severe distrust in the community. We need an independent special prosecutor on every single case involving police brutality and police violence. There is a statute in the state of Michigan that allows us to refer those cases up to the attorney general and seek the appointment of a special prosecutor. I will do that categorically in all cases. But let's be real for a second. Police misconduct is not just about physical brutality. Police misconduct is about racial profiling. It is about constitutional violations of people's rights. That is what has engendered a lot of distrust among communities against the police. And so there are a couple of very specific things that I will do as prosecutor to root that out. Number one, we need to not force defendants as the price of a plea bargain to give up their right to litigate constitutional violations. This happens far too often, and it sweeps police misconduct under the rug. So when I am prosecutor, our plea bargains will not include those sort of what we call waivers of your right to litigate constitutional violations. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Savit. Now we're going to go, it is time for us to stop with the questions and move on to the closing statements. We will begin the closing statements with Mr. Mack. And as you make your closing remarks, would you comment on your definition of success?
Well, thank you so much. My definition of success is being everything that the God force has created you to be. Success is not measured by how many times you win. Success is measured by how many times you get up after being knocked down. That is the success I will bring to Washtenaw County as the next prosecutor. A prosecutor who's been knocked down but never knocked out. A prosecutor who stood on integrity in the face of insurmountable odds. A prosecutor who knows what it's like to defend a cause at the threat of their own life. So when you look at the candidates, when you look at myself, look at my total life story. Look at the integrity that I've displayed. Look at the unsurpassed legal experience I have. Look at the unsurpassed administrative experience I have. Look at my understanding of what it's like to represent and defend the constitutional rights of people who cannot defend and protect themselves. Over 800 victims of domestic violence. I understand their pain. I understand the dehumanizing effect of systemic racism. It is one thing to talk about you support restorative justice. It is something else to be the living, breathing example of it. It is one thing to talk about we need to stop mass incarceration, something else to be the victim of it. So for me, with everybody that comes into that courtroom, there's compassion, there's heart, there's respect, there's dignity. We can bring it to account, we hold police accountable and maintain their humanity as well. Thank you and God bless you.
Thank you very much. Mr. Savit, unmute yourself.
Thank you. This justice system affects thousands of people per year, and so it's crucial to identify our metrics for success. And what success looks like for me is, number one, a justice system that promotes rehabilitation. Number two, a prosecutor's office that is equitable and fair. Number three, a prosecutor's office that saves us money by stopping the system in which we are sending people into jail and prison at great taxpayer expense. So what metrics are we going to be looking at? First and foremost, let's look at the recidivism rates. Let's look at how often people are coming back through the system after we've seen them one time. We have close to a 70% recidivism rate in Washtenaw County right now. which demonstrates that despite maintaining a system which has been quote unquote tough on crime, which has been marked by severe inequity, at the end of the day, our system isn't keeping us safe. Our system isn't saving us money. I will tell you this. We are not going to operate behind closed doors or behind a curtain when I am prosecutor. These metrics, our recidivism rate, the racial and socioeconomic inequities in our justice system, the amount of money that we are spending on jail and prison sentences each year, are going to be available to each of you online, transparently, when I am prosecutor. Because ultimately, the prosecutor works for you. You deserve a prosecutor who is going to keep you safe, who is going to promote equity, and who is going to save you money. And as prosecutor, we will build a system that will allow us to be held to account on those metrics.
Thank you very much, Mr. Savit. Ms. Slay.
Thank you. Success is co-produce criminal justice reform. Because if we do not spend time, effort, and money in our social reforms, we cannot have criminal justice reform. No candidate on this ballot can stand up and say that they can end cash bail, that they can make sweeping changes to the justice system without having co-produced and collaborative relationships to bring forth meaningful change, ending the school to prison pipeline, access to healthcare. Success looks like now 44 open homicides in the last 24 months in this county. Success looks like every Black person in this county driving down Washtenaw, not being afraid that they're going to be pulled over, racially profiled, or shot. It is time out for this. Success looks like trust. And this is what I will bring to the Washtenaw County Prosecutor's Office. I will bring the transparency. And let me tell you this job is not for a rookie. This job requires dedication to this craft. And it is downright disrespectful to say that you can walk in and not have practiced at all in a criminal courtroom and say that you could handle this because you understand the systems. This is about people, not systems. And how we treat each other matters. If we want to end the racism that has plagued our county and our country for years, we need to do it together, not one person alone. I'm asking for your support on August 4th. Thank you very much and have a good evening.
Thank you. Thank you all. That concludes the questions of our forum tonight, and I want to thank all of our candidates for your participation in this very valuable session. I will now turn this over to Ms. Dishon for our closing comments.
The League of Women Voters, the Dispute Resolution Center, and the Washtenaw County Bar Association thank the candidates who participated in tonight's forum. And we also appreciate the people who contributed questions. All our candidate forums will be available for streaming on your computer or smartphone in many different ways. You can go to our website, lwvannarbor.org, and look for the link to the programs. In addition, the forums can be viewed on CTN Channel 13 and at the DRC Facebook page at Dispute Resolution Center A2. Please urge your friends and neighbors to watch these forums too. For additional nonpartisan information on candidates and ballot issues, go to vote411.org, the League's voter resource guide, covering local, state, and federal candidates and the current proposals that will appear on your ballot. As a reminder, all voters are now eligible to cast an absentee ballot. In addition, while voters are encouraged to register ahead of time, Michigan law now provides for same-day registration. So remember, no matter how you do it, by absentee ballot or in person at the polls, make sure you vote in the August 4th primary election. Good evening.